Teresa and everyone for coming. It's special for me. Sam came all the way down from Alaska, but I happen to live in Ellensburg, so it's like a homecoming for me. So if you see the big green Munster house on 2nd Sampson with the tree house in the front yard, then you know where I'm at. Anyway, I'll let Sam say a couple words and we'll get going.
I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight, and we just like to take questions. So if anybody in the audience has a question, put your hand up, we'll call on you, and we'll try to answer it.
I can understand during the time of the film, the industry was new, and as you're saying, you're young and uninformed, and listening to the people ahead that needs to know better, that all makes sense. So, but now that we are in the information age where you can't hide from that, what is the reality of those places now, and the feeling of those trainers that maybe are like you at that time? They were young and excited, but surely they can't hide as easily from this information and this, knowledge.
That's an excellent question, and we have discussed this amongst ourselves numerous times. Last weekend, I was in Niagara Falls, and I went to see Marineland, where there are several trainers there who have recently quit or been fired and are now being sued by the owner of Marineland, John Bowler, in Niagara Falls, for speaking out against the company. And talking to them, it's a very similar dynamic. It's very, the industry, it's kind of hard to understand the industry. You have to think about it as sort of a cult-like environment. It's very insulated, it's very isolated. If you want to stay in the industry working with these animals, you don't speak out. You don't really even look for information outside of what the company tells you. Jeff and John Jeff in the film wrote a paper called Keto Until It Come Express the Stress of Captivity, and it looked at the background of some of these animals in captivity, the kinds of ailments that they suffer from, what causes the stress in captivity, the fact that the mortality rate is 2.5 times higher in captivity than it is in the wild. And that paper did circulate around SeaWorld, and we know from one of the other trainers in this film, the former trainers, John Hargrove, that many of the trainers refused to even read that paper, even though it was readily available on the internet. So I think what happens is there's sort of a cognitive dissonance that happens, that people love the animals so much and they don't really want to believe that what's going on is what's really going on. And the longer you stay there, the more you have to convince yourself that things are not really what they seem.
Well said, Sam. I'll just add one more thing. The industry itself is a very secretive one, and one of the things that allowed for Samantha and myself, John Jetty's professor at Stetson, and Carol Ray, she's got a speech pathology business over in Seattle, is that we have been separated from SeaWorld, in my case, over 15, 20 years. So I wasn't able to be, I didn't necessarily go looking for this, but I didn't have any fear of just speaking my mind, and so that kind of led. What you're seeing right here is really the first time that SeaWorld hasn't been able to control the message. So really, you guys are like, disciples of the message now. So the movie is coming to CNN October 24th, and we think that more people will see it in one day than have seen it at all the film festivals and theaters. So we're hosting a party at our Green Monster House, I think, that night, the 24th. But people all across the country are hosting parties, kind of like during election season when they have people coming together. There's a hashtag that people are using on Twitter called Blackfish Party, because we're just trying to get the word out. And CNN, of course, has got viewers all over the world. So hopefully, with the educational component that this film provides, it's very digestible in 83 minutes. I think you guys pretty much get the whole picture right now. And there's a lot more information out there. So right now, we're still in the disseminating information mode, and we're really excited about it.
So what can people do? I mean, what can people in our situation do to help voice our concern about this?
Well, another excellent question. We have a website called Voice of the Orcas, and on that website there's a landing. It's called the Blackfish landing page. So if you just go to our homepage, you'll see it, and it lists actions that you can take to make a difference in this situation. One of the things we are asking is that people pressure the parks to stop the captive breeding program. You saw a little bit of it in this movie, but unfortunately right now the way SeaWorld presents that breeding program is that it's more humane than the wild captures. But in fact, in some ways it's even less humane. One of the former trainers in the movie, John Hargrove, describes it as kind of like an alien abduction. These animals are forced to breed at a very young age. In the wild, killer whales wouldn't start breeding, the females wouldn't start breeding until 15 or 16 years old. And in SeaWorld, they're forced to breed 5, 6, 7 years old. And then as soon as their babies are weaned and as soon as they go into estrus, they are inseminated again. They can tell by taking urine samples from the animals that they're ready to breed again, and then they just get the frozen semen and they do it all over again, so they're turning them into baby machines. So one of the ways we can stop this is put pressure on them to stop the breeding program. The other thing is you can vote with your dollars, so just don't go. You know, do not go to places like SeaWorld. Don't go there and say that you're not going to go there until they stop, you know, exploiting animals for entertainment. Other things you can do is just talk to your friends, talk to your family. There's a great book called Death at SeaWorld by David Kirby. The book came out a year before the film came out, and it will give a lot more background. It's a 450-page book, and there's no pictures, unfortunately, but it is very informative. So if you're interested in this issue, you can read that book, and you can learn more, and again, you can talk about it. I know a lot of the schools, for instance, in Orlando, make field trips to SeaWorld. In fact, in Broward County, it's written into their curriculum that they have to take the kids there. And so what we're trying to do is get this message out to school kids and let them, because those are they're going to, you know, change the next generation that's coming up. They're going to change this. So especially, you know, parents with kids, it's usually moms who make the decisions about where to take their family on vacation. And so let them know, you know, you can go see wild whales off the coast of the San Juan Islands way cheaper than you can go to a place like SeaWorld.
One thing that might have, I'll get to you in a second. One thing that is happening right now is that there's been a certain group of animals, such as great apes, elephants, killer whales, and cetaceans, that a guy by the name of Steve Wise, who's an attorney, he's been fighting for the Non-Human Rights Project, and they're trying to bring a legal case in a U.S. common law court that's going to be filed this fall on behalf of a particular animal. I think they selected a chimpanzee with the idea that some animals have earned non-human personhood status. We're not saying that they're people, but they grieve their young, they use tools, they use language, they have culture, and they have earned certain protections under the law that they don't currently have. Right now, these animals are treated as property, and so the industry can do basically whatever they want. And so they trade them and breed them and kill them and capture them and do whatever they want without any ramifications. If the animals had a little bit more oomph under the law, it would be much harder to exploit them. So we're hoping that this test case will maybe award some certain species of animals more protections under the law. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, since you've obviously given this more thought than most of us here, it's hard for me to perceive an ethical distinction between marine mammals and all other mammals, for example, all other animals in general. I mean, I don't see the distinction between imprisoning these animals and zoos and so forth.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that we've got to take baby steps in the legal frontier. There's a lot of people that feel very strongly that animals don't deserve any rights. It's obvious to us that certain animals do. I'm personally against keeping basically mammals in captivity, especially free-ranging mammals. That includes elephants, bears, tiger, big cats. You go and you see the stereotypic behavior where they're just pacing back and forth all day. You see, gorillas doing stereotypic behavior here. One thing that I liked about the Chimpanzee Institute when it was here was that it was a sanctuary. They weren't asked to perform. And I always enjoyed the chimp talks that they had at the college. But SeaWorld is basically a circus environment, and these animals work for food. And we're making the statement in the film and personally at our website and others that it's time for captivity to come to an end. And we're just trying to get the word out right now. So I agree with you.
I'm wondering what the reality is of these whales being reintroduced into the wild and if they're able to be integrated into other groups or if they're going to remain solitary.
So it's a really complicated question. There's a lot of what ifs in there. There are several animals right now that are in captivity that are excellent candidates for release. Most of them are not at SeaWorld. One of them happens to be at the Miami Seaquarium. Her name is Lolita, and you saw her family in this movie. She's one of the southern residents, and she's been in captivity for over 43 years, and she's been by herself for almost all that time, the past 25 years, I think at least. But what's interesting about that is because she's been solitary, a lot of this aggression behavior that you saw in the movie doesn't happen because she's by herself. And in fact, she's in really good health. She has excellent teeth. One of the things that we didn't talk about in the movie, but it's in Jeff and John's paper, is that the killer whales break their teeth on the steel bars, the gates that separate the pools. They do something called jaw popping. And once they break their teeth, they have to drill down into their jaw. It's called a pulpotomy. They drill the pulp out of their teeth. And then SeaWorld trainers 3 times a day have to go and flush their teeth with like a water pick device just to keep food from plugging in their teeth so that they don't get septic. Now, you couldn't really see it that well in the movie, but if you go online, you can see pictures of Tillicum's teeth, and his teeth are horrible. I don't think he really has any left. So he's an animal just because of how sick he is. Also, when the day that he killed Dawn, he was on antibiotics. I think he's on antifungals. I've heard rumors that he might have even been on antidepressants. He eats about 10 gallons of gelatin per day just to stay hydrated. He's probably got ulcers. A lot of the whales, when we were there, were taking Tagamet because of their stomachs. So we were having they're not even, the nutrition that they've been getting because they're not eating a diet like they would eat in the wild has been really poor, and it's one of the things that contributes to the mortality. So a lot of them are sick. So you have to look at them on an individual basis. So Tillicum, also the fact that he's killed 3 people, not many people would want to take the liability for that. And then another issue is that just reintroducing these animals into the wild, we don't know if they could be introducing new pathogens to the wild population. So there's a lot of questions as far as the scientific community is concerned. But if you watch the story, the movie Keiko, The Untold Story, it looks at the whale from the movie Free Willy and how he was actually successfully released into the wild. The captive marine mammal industry will characterize that as the worst case of animal abuse on the planet, but this is an animal that was in a solitary, tiny warm pool in Mexico, months away from death, couldn't even hold his breath underwater for a minute, and went from that to actually swimming 1,000 miles on his own with wild whales from Iceland to Norway, and in fact died in the wild, not in captivity, so I personally consider that a success.
Yes.
Has there been any response from SeaWorld about this film?
There has been. Right before it opened in theaters in Los Angeles and New York, SeaWorld put out a statement, like an 8-point statement saying that the film, it didn't even look like they had seen the film based on their statement. They were just very critical of the film. They sent it to 50 well-known movie critics. And unfortunately for them, it's just generated more attention to the movie. So now, a couple million people have seen the movie because of that. But yeah, they put out a statement, and it really just didn't make sense. Basically, they were saying the movie doesn't show how well we take care of our animals. They weren't really responding to the movie. They were just putting out 8 of their own talking points that they've been using for, this corporate speak stuff that they use. They don't really address the points of the movie. They just say, don't go see the movie. We love our animals. Here, come buy an $81 ticket. Check it out for yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, they have responded. Yes.
What's the compensation for a trainer?
What? Very, very low. Yeah. When I started in 1987, I think I was making $5 an hour. 87. Then by the time I was a senior trainer in 1995, working a lot of overtime, I think my annual salary was right at $30,000. After 8 years of experience and being at the top level, salaries haven't really changed that much in the last 15, 20 years. It's really a low-paying job. And I thought, and I think Samantha, Sam, we were both educated. About 50% of the people have some type of college background, but like Kim Ashdown says in the film, there really isn't much of a requirement to get hired there. So they are looking for people that can swim. If you've got an education, that's a bonus. But yeah, look, can talk and do push-ups and wear a wetsuit and stuff like that. That's really kind of what they're looking for. But the pay is very low. What's that?
And is willing to get in a pool.
Yeah, we were pretty naive. Like it was stated in the movie, we didn't know anything about Kelty Burns' death really, other than the other whales did it. And because I actually stood on Tillicum's back one day when we were opening in the morning, and I probably wouldn't have done that had I known the details of Kelty's death.
Just have 2 quick questions. One is that with the top fin being flopped over, they talked about that, but they didn't really say why the fin is flopped over. And then also, I was wondering, it seems like when other animals kill humans, it seems like they're euthanized or something. Why is it that
recently, it's been, probably like $10 million, something along those lines. So there's several reasons why the dorsal fins collapse. Number one, they're made out of fibrous connective tissue. Like other connective tissues in the body, for example, muscles and fascia and stuff like that. When you go to the gym, your muscles get bigger, right? So these animals are surface resting a lot, so their backs are above the water. At SeaWorld in Florida, only 2 of the 7 pools where Tilikum lives are deeper than he is long. So his back is out of the water almost constantly. And so there's the effect of gravity. A bull killer whale's fin is over 6 feet tall, taller than me, so it probably weighs 300 or 400 pounds. They eat fast frozen thawed fish. When you fast freeze a fish and then thaw it out, it loses some of its water content. These animals get all of their water from the food that they eat, so they're always in a constant state of dehydration because they're not getting as much water. They eat less calories in captivity because, for the most part, if you look at the distribution of killer whales around the world, they tend to concentrate more in Arctic and Antarctic, areas. They do cross through tropical waters for the most part, so they eat a lot less in Orlando, Florida, Texas, and California, right? They're in a low latitude environment, eating about half as what they would eat in the wild, so they're getting way less water. Their backs are exposed to the sun. Most of the pools aren't covered, so they're just getting bombarded with ultraviolet radiation. They frequently get sunburned. We used to apply black-colored zinc oxide to their back to disguise their sunburn because they'd be flaky. Skin would just be sloughing off, and we were trying to hide that. And so warm water, connective tissue that isn't getting a workout, so to speak, the effects of gravity, and the heat. They're all constantly, in the wild, they spend over 90% of their time below the surface of the water. The dorsal fin acts as a cooling ventilation system. When there's, a lot of times they're chasing fish and their body heats up, and so when they're at the surface, it radiates heat, and so it acts like a radiator in your car, and also like the keel of a sailboat.
If you kind of get to know them, their intelligence and different personality and communicate with them.
Yes?
Yes, we did, and we all would say, everybody had a favorite animal, but I think one of the things that SeaWorld does is that they present this relationship between the animals and the trainers, this special relationship, this magical relationship, that you start to think it might be like a relationship that you'd have with another human being, and the truth is, this is operant conditioning. It's the animal does something and they get a food reward. It's called primary reinforcement. They get fish. And then eventually, as you get to know an animal better, you start to know that animal's likes and dislikes. Oh, this animal likes to have a rub down, or this animal likes to do high energy behaviors, or this animal likes to be in a pool with that animal. And that's really the relationship part of it. And I'm not saying that it's not a one-sided thing, that we certainly didn't love the animals. And there are some animals that I would say, I could jump in the pool with and wrap myself around and just felt like they were cuddly teddy bears. But the truth is, we have no idea what was going on the other side. And, of course, we'll never know. And we know that we can't possibly meet these animals' needs in captivity, so I kind of wonder about the relationship is more like the relationship that a prisoner would have with a prison guard. They're dependent on us for everything. And so, of course, they seem like they're close to us, but would they choose to interact with us in the wild? Most people say when they see these animals, sometimes they'll come over and check people out, but they don't really seek us out to interact with in the wild. In captivity, we're it. The trainers are it. They're the ones that feed the animals. They're the ones that take care of them. They give the animals everything they need. So some kind of relationship does develop, but I wouldn't say it's a desirable one.
Very good film, and I love your house. We're actually neighbors.
Nice.
The tree board.
Fair enough.
Have you been listening to AC/DC a lot?
I'm curious if you guys maybe know, we don't have any SeaWorld in Washington that I know of. Are there states that are basically saying we don't want you here? Do you know anything like that? Maybe that's an avenue that can be explored as far as getting these companies involved.
I know there are countries countries, like Costa Rica right now is in the process of banning all caged animals. And India just said that they wouldn't have any marine parks. But India's a little bit schizophrenic, so at the same time that they're saying we won't have any marine parks, they're also looking at collecting animals for marine parks. We know places like China and Japan are ramping up. I don't know any state-specific legislation right now, but that's an excellent question for Dr. Naomi Rose, who was not in the film, but she's the star, or basically the main character in David Kirby's book, Death at SeaWorld. I was with her last weekend in Niagara Falls, and she used to be the senior scientist for the Humane Society, and she's a world-renowned killer whale expert. She worked with the northern residents in Canada. She knows a lot about policy, so if you email us, you can get to us on Twitter. We're at Voice of the Orcas. I'm at Sam10K. He's at Jeffrey_Ventre. So you can Twitter to us, or you can we can give you our email afterwards, and I can get an answer for you on that. But I don't know specifically as far as this country is concerned.
In general, politicians tend to align with corporations. So you get a company, we know this, right? Yeah. So someone asked the question, Pedro, I think, earlier, about what can be done. Laws have to change. The judicial system has this case I was telling you about. But SeaWorld's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Most politicians would welcome the sea circus to town because it creates jobs. So one big feature of this movie is that now we're all able to kind of spread the word. And I hope that there's this critical mass or threshold of people that become aware on this issue now that can take action. And that means, like Sam said, don't buy a ticket, number one, and vote for leaders that are eco-friendly. Yep.
You know the status now, the current status of OSHA's, the field by SeaWorld, OSHA's order?
Yeah, SeaWorld, interestingly, has hired, who's the... Antonio Scalia's son as their appeal lawyer. He's like a high-powered, really gung-ho, right-winger guy that's going to come out and crush OSHA. And there's all this posturing going out, and we'll see what happens. They've got a lot of money, and it's being handled through the Secretary of Labor. So this has gone all the way to the top. And there's going to be, SeaWorld has appealed OSHA's ruling, and SeaWorld is attempting to get it overturned so they can put trainers back in the water.
And they already lowered the fine. Initially was for a willful violation, which means SeaWorld basically knew that they were putting Dawn in a dangerous position, and it already got lowered to a serious violation, which was a lower fee, and that was a little bit of a win for SeaWorld, the fact that the judge lowered it to that. And what is not totally clear to everybody in the film even is that they only limited trainers from going in the water during shows. For some reason, there was a mistake, and they only say they have to not go in the water during shows. So we know that they've been taking what we call approximations, like starting up again with water work with certain animals in the medical pools where they can lift the moving bottom up. So they've all along, I think the SeaWorld management has assumed that they will eventually be getting their trainers back in the water with the animals. But from our perspective, everything that we've seen, it's just a matter of time until somebody else gets injured or badly injured or killed. And so it seems to me, I can't imagine that there's an insurance company on the planet that would take the risk. But this is their business model. They've done things this way for 40 some odd years, and that's just the way they do it. So again, if they could see another way out, that the business model that they've got doesn't work anymore, and they could see another possibility for a new business model, that would be great. Because they say that about 70% of their revenue comes from the fact that the park has killer whales. It's hard to say right now whether or not having the trainers out of the water for the past 3 years has impacted that or not, but they, as a company, are still convinced that the killer whales are part of their revenue, so they're going to fight as hard as they can to make sure that they stay there.
Question, it seems like, both of us thought, so you guys are advocating for the whales, but OSHA's just advocating for the humans. Do you feel like you're at odds at all, or are they supporting you?
There's an overlap. That's a great question, because Laura Paget, the OSHA caseworker, when we started speaking out, it was a natural alliance. We're kind of coming at it from a little bit of a different perspective, because we believe that number one, having OSHA sue SeaWorld or having that legal back and forth really opened all this up to discovery. That's one mechanism that Gabriella used, Freedom of Information Act, to get a lot of the footage that you saw in the film. So we're on the same side as OSHA, because we're fighting from a little bit of a different perspective. You're right. OSHA's interested in protecting people. we're interested in protecting or changing the conversation at least. We're not trying to shut SeaWorld down. We just want them to stop keeping killer whales in captivity because we think it's immoral.
Are there problems with other animals in the park?
Absolutely, yeah. There's animals that die from eating coins in the feeding pool. There's a walrus that named Gwen that I worked with in 1993 that for whatever reason she was pregnant. They wanted to separate her from Garfield, the big male, even though every night they'd spoon each other. So they put her up in a dry pen and she was pregnant. And you know, these animals are defecating on the ground. So it ended up where she scraped her underbelly and became septic and died just because they wouldn't give her any access to a pool. You know, so weird causes of death happen all the time. 2 of the killer whales died from mosquito bites. One of them, viral infection, St. Louis encephalitis and West Nile virus. One was Kanduke in 1990 and Taku in 2007. They both died at ages 20 and 14, which is really young. In the paper that Sam mentioned earlier, when John Jett and I wrote this paper, we averaged out all the lifespans of all. There's been about 200 animals in captivity over the entire duration of this experiment. 75% of those are dead, so over 150 are dead. And you simply average out their lifespan in captivity and give credit for the half dozen, like Tillicum, that have made it to age 30. They live less than 10 years. So they die really young in captivity, oftentimes from exotic infections like viral infections or getting scraped up or eating coins. One of them was zinc poisoning, one of the dolphins. I mean, so captivity is pretty much, you know, not good for cetaceans of any kind.
Yeah, and I actually saw one of my favorite animals starve to death. It was completely a behavioral problem. She was a young dolphin. Her mom had died from a fungal infection that she'd been given a drug that she had a poor reaction to, and she was a subdominant animal similar to Tillicum, and 2 of the dominant females would basically push her around until she would throw up her food, and eventually it became more reinforcing for her to vomit up her food and play with it than it was for her to eat it. And we watched this playful, sweet animal who was really interested in interacting with humans just waste away to nothing. And for me, I think that was a sentinel moment for me, just thinking like, wow, I wonder what we're doing here, because this to me was a behavioral problem, that this animal was starving herself to death, and despite tube feeding and despite everything we could think of to do, she still literally became anorexic and died.
Does anyone know what happened with the calves that were separated?
Takara is alive, and Kalina died at age 25 of acute bacterial septicemia. She, in my opinion, my medical opinion, had blood. She got bacteria through the jaw, the open boreholes in the teeth that Sam was talking about. They break their. What happens is these animals do these threat displays at each other, and they'll. You know how like 2 dogs on opposite sides of a fence will get really kind of more aggressive than if you open the gate. So they'll do that. Excuse me, and they'll charge the gate. And the gates have horizontal steel bars, and they'll chomp down, and it ends up knocking the enamel off of their teeth. And they've got upside down like ice cream cone shaped teeth, so it like fractures the tooth. And the inside of their tooth is just like ours. It's got a fleshy pulp. And for whatever reason, they do a root canal on every tooth that gets fractured like that. And in Tillicum's case, he doesn't have a single tooth left on his bottom jaw. So all he's got are these open boreholes, and we'd have to flush that out with a betadine solution 3 times a day. And this gets to the question of releasability, you know. A lot of these animals require a lot of veterinary care, ongoing husbandry every day. So, yeah, I forgot what the other thing.
Good question. Why Kalina died?
Kalina died from, basically her blood became septic because the killer whale's jaw is very vascular, and the bacteria from the fish got into her jaw, and she died like in a day.
And just because of all the effects of captivity that you saw in the movie, I mean, these animals are under constant stress all the time, and we know what stress does to humans. It suppresses the immune system, so they're susceptible to all sorts of things that they wouldn't be in the wild. Do you have a question, Maria? You have your hand up.
I've had several.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. We enjoyed